The neural interface crackled against Captain Vrex Korvan's scaled temple, its amber glow reflecting off the polished walls of the hegemony tribunal chamber. 3 years had passed since the Kepler 442b incident, but the weight of those memories pressed against his consciousness like shrapnel lodged too deep to extract. Around him, younger officers leaned forward in their seats, eager to understand how a primitive human colony had shattered the career of one of the hegemony's most decorated fleet commanders. "State your designation and the nature of your testimony," commanded Magistrate Veltara, her voice carrying the cold authority of imperial justice. Korvan's primary eyes fixed on the recording apparatus while his secondary pair swept the gallery, cataloging faces that would soon learn uncomfortable truths about warfare. Captain Vrex Korvan, formerly commanding officer of Hegemony 3rd Fleet Battle Group 7. I am here to provide tactical analysis of what Command has designated as the first major defeat of hegemony forces by a technologically inferior species. He paused, feeling the familiar phantom pain in his left arm, a reminder of the flagship's bridge exploding around him during humanity's counterattack. What I will tell you challenges every assumption we hold about the relationship between technological superiority and military victory. The memory crystals hummed to life, and Korvan's consciousness drifted back to that first day when victory seemed inevitable and humans appeared to be just another species destined for hegemony industrial facilities. 12 heavy cruisers had dropped from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of a military machine that had never known defeat. Kepler 442b hung before them like a prize waiting to be claimed. 2 million human colonists, extensive mining operations, and defensive capabilities that belonged in a tactical museum. "Sensor sweep complete," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Drex, mandibles clicking with professional satisfaction. 32 orbital defense platforms detected, primitive kinetic weapons, basic missile systems. Estimated threat level, negligible. Korvan had nodded from his command throne, studying tactical displays that confirmed everything intelligence reports had promised. The humans possessed no energy weapons capable of penetrating hegemony shields, no fighters that could challenge cruiser-class vessels, and no coordination networks sophisticated enough to mount effective resistance. Commence orbital bombardment. Primary targets, military installations and command structures. Standard pacification protocol. The first strike eliminated 17 defensive satellites in a coordinated plasma barrage that lit up the planet's upper atmosphere. Secondary strikes took out surface military installations with the methodical precision that had made hegemony expansion unstoppable across 47 star systems. Surface resistance eliminated, Weapons Officer Kex reported after the final military installation disappeared in superheated plasma. Scanning for secondary targets. Negative hostile emissions detected, sir. It had taken exactly 2 days to reduce human military capability to 0. Their orbital defenses crumbled under the first concentrated bombardment. Surface installations, clearly marked and heavily fortified, provided textbook targets for plasma strikes. Even their atmospheric fighters, obsolete chemical fuel aircraft, posed no meaningful threat to vessels designed to survive asteroid fields. Yet as Korvan reviewed damage assessments with growing satisfaction, his sensor operators were detecting anomalies that would later prove crucial to understanding human warfare doctrine. "Sir," reported sensor technician Yex, his voice carrying the uncertainty of someone observing data that didn't match theoretical predictions, "deep scan arrays are detecting movement signatures in the planetary cave systems. Thermal readings suggest organized activity approximately 3 kilometers below surface level." Korvan dismissed the report with barely a thought. "Civilian refugees seeking shelter. Standard population displacement behavior when facing orbital bombardment. Continues systematic infrastructure reduction." The assumption seemed logical based on previous conquest operations. Every species the hegemony had encountered followed predictable patterns when facing overwhelming force. Military resistance collapsed after losing orbital superiority, civilian populations sought underground shelter, and organized resistance ceased within days of initial bombardment. But Lieutenant Commander Daxus Thorne was 3 kilometers below ground, coordinating something the hegemony had never encountered: a military force that treated orbital bombardment not as the end of conflict, but as the opening phase of a longer campaign. Infrastructure damage assessment? Thorne asked his engineering staff, studying displays powered by generators that had been relocated underground months before the invasion began. Surface manufacturing completely destroyed, reported Chief Engineer Martinez, reviewing reconnaissance data transmitted by hidden sensors. Power grid eliminated, communication networks down, transportation infrastructure non-functional. Perfect, Thorne replied, causing confused glances among his staff. Exactly what we wanted them to think. The underground facilities represented 6 months of preparation based on intelligence warnings from other human worlds. Natural cave systems had been expanded and reinforced, creating hardened command centers capable of reviving sustained orbital bombardment. Manufacturing equipment had been relocated from surface factories to underground workshops. Most importantly, communication networks had been redesigned to operate through quantum burst transmissions that appeared to alien sensors as random civilian distress calls. Above them, Corvan was transmitting his preliminary victory report to Hegemony Command with the confidence of an officer who had followed doctrine perfectly. Kepler 442b pacification proceeding ahead of schedule, he recorded, standing before tactical displays that showed a planet stripped of military capability. Human resistance eliminated within 48 hours. Colonial population displaying standard capitulation patterns. No significant casualties among hegemony forces. Recommend immediate transition to Phase 2 occupation protocols. The response from Fleet Admiral Thex arrived within hours, carrying the satisfaction of commanders who appreciated efficient operations. Excellent work, Captain. Your battle group has achieved textbook victory in record time. Industrial assessment teams will arrive within 10 standard cycles. Prepare for ground occupation operations. Yet even as Corvan accepted congratulations from his senior staff and prepared detailed reports documenting the swift elimination of human military capability, his sensor operators continued tracking unexplained activity in the planet's underground networks. Movement patterns in cave systems show unusual organization, sensor technician Yex reported during the 3rd day of orbital bombardment. Thermal signatures suggest coordinated activity rather than random refugee displacement. Probably survivors establishing emergency shelters, Corvan replied, his attention focused on preparing landing zones for occupation forces. Civilian populations always attempt to organize basic services when FASI. In crisis situations, the intelligence assessment supported his interpretation. Humans demonstrated predictable behavior patterns when confronted with superior force. They built defensive positions that could be easily targeted from orbit, used conventional military doctrine that hegemony forces were specifically designed to counter, and showed no evidence of tactical innovation or adaptive strategic thinking. What Corvan didn't understand was that those civilian emergency broadcasts his communications officers were monitoring were actually encrypted tactical updates coordinating resistance operations across multiple star systems. The random refugee movements in cave systems were actually engineering teams preparing manufacturing facilities for weapons production. Most critically, the apparent collapse of human military capability was carefully orchestrated deception designed to lower hegemony alert levels. Sir, his communications officer interrupted his review of occupation logistics. Receiving increased transmission activity from planetary surface appears to be civilian emergency coordination, medical requests, evacuation assistance, resource distribution, content analysis, standard population management during crisis situations. Nothing of military significance detected. Corvan nodded absently, his mind already focused on the commendations he would receive for achieving victory without a single hegemony casualty. The human colony had been neutralized exactly as doctrine predicted. Overwhelming technological superiority had translated directly into swift, decisive conquest. But 3 kilometers below Kepler 442b's surface, Daxus Thorn was coordinating the most sophisticated deception operation in human military history, using the hegemony's assumptions about primitive opponents to mask preparations for a counterattack that would redefine interstellar warfare. The perfect victory was about to become a lesson in the difference between winning battles and understanding war. Lieutenant Commander Daxus Thorn stood before a holographic display showing the wreckage of humanity's first victory, though Captain Corvan wouldn't recognize it as such for several more hours. Scattered across 3 kilometers of space, the debris signatures of 5 hegemony vessels told a story that challenged everything the aliens believed about technological warfare. Detonation analysis confirms our theoretical models, reported Chief Engineer Martinez, his hands still stained with exotic lubricants from salvaged alien machinery. Hegemony power cells can be converted into fusion explosives by inverting their containment field harmonics. Crude by their standards, but each improvised device carries the explosive yield of a tactical nuclear weapon. Thorn nodded, studying technical readouts that represented weeks of desperate engineering work. The underground facilities had been converting mining equipment into weapons manufacturing since the invasion began, but their breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. The wreckage of hegemony landing craft shot down during the aliens' initial assault. "How many more devices can we produce with current salvage?" he asked. "Maybe 30 units using existing materials. But here's the crucial factor. Every successful attack provides us with additional alien technology for reverse engineering. We're creating a feedback loop where each victory gives us resources for the next engagement." The strategy was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Use hegemony technology against hegemony forces while operating from positions that orbital bombardment couldn't reach. Every destroyed convoy provided power cells, communication systems, and technical components that human engineers could adapt for military purposes. Above them, Captain Corvan was learning that his assumptions about primitive human warfare were catastrophically wrong. "Convoy 7 Alpha destroyed at coordinates 44 Mark 7, reported his tactical officer, studying sensor logs that defied military logic. "No enemy vessels detected in engagement area. No missile launches recorded. Debris patterns suggest simultaneous internal explosions across all 5 ships." Corvan stared at the tactical display showing another impossible victory by enemies who shouldn't exist. Internal explosions? Sabotage during loading operations? "Negative, sir. Security protocols confirm no unauthorized personnel accessed convoy vessels during departure procedures. Blast analysis indicates improvised explosive devices built from our own technology, but what? Sir, the technical sophistication required to convert our power cells into weapons suggests engineering capability far beyond what intelligence reports indicated. These aren't desperate survivors building crude bombs. This is systematic weapons development by trained personnel with access to sophisticated manufacturing facilities." The implications sent a chill through Corvan's secondary nervous system. His bombardment had supposedly eliminated all human industrial capacity, yet someone was producing increasingly sophisticated weapons using alien technology. Either his intelligence assessments were completely wrong, or human military doctrine was fundamentally different from every other species the hegemony had encountered. "Analysis of attack patterns?" he demanded. "No consistent targeting methodology detected. First convoy was hit near the jump point, second attack occurred in open space, third engagement took place within an asteroid field. They appear to be selecting targets based on opportunity rather than strategic value." What Corvan didn't understand was that human tactical doctrine emphasized disruption over destruction. Lieutenant Commander Thorn wasn't trying to eliminate the hegemony fleet. He was forcing them to adapt their operations in ways that created exploitable vulnerabilities. "Supply chain disruption report?" Thorne asked his intelligence staff, reviewing reconnaissance data transmitted by surface observation teams. Alien fleet has increased escort strength to minimum 4 vessels per convoy, reported Lieutenant Torres, recently returned from a dangerous surface mission to plant monitoring equipment. They've also implemented random routing protocols and extended patrol schedules. Most importantly, they're diverting combat vessels from bombardment duties to convoy protection. Excellent. Reduced bombardment intensity gives our manufacturing operations breathing room, and extended patrol schedules create predictable vulnerability windows we can exploit. The underground command center buzzed with activity as human engineers adapted their tactics to match hegemony countermeasures. When the aliens increased convoy escorts, human attackers shifted to remote detonation using captured communication frequencies. When routing became randomized, reconnaissance teams began placing improvised mines along predicted patrol corridors using alien navigation computers to calculate optimal ambush positions. Each tactical adaptation by the hegemony was met by human innovation that turned alien advantages into weapons against their creators. The quantum burst communication network, still disguised as civilian emergency broadcasts, coordinated intelligence sharing between resistance cells across the planet and beyond. Confirmed transmission from Tau Ceti resistance, reported communications specialist Rodriguez, his voice tight with excitement. They've successfully analyzed hegemony shield frequency patterns. Technical specifications match our theoretical models. The scope of human strategic planning was becoming clear. This wasn't isolated resistance by colonial survivors, it was coordinated military doctrine developed and shared across multiple star systems during active combat operations. While hegemony forces celebrated easy victories, their enemies had been analyzing alien technology and developing countermeasures. How many other worlds are implementing similar operations? Thorne asked. Intelligence suggests resistance networks on 12 human colonies, all sharing tactical innovations through encrypted quantum burst communications. The aliens think they're hearing random distress calls, but we're actually coordinating the largest intelligence operation in human history. Above them, Corvan was discovering that superior technology meant nothing when the enemy refused to fight conventionally. Casualty assessment? He asked his logistics officer, reviewing reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. 23 vessels lost over the past week, sir. No confirmed kills on human forces. Attack sophistication indicates organized military resistance rather than desperate survivor activity. How is that possible? Our bombardment eliminated every military installation on the planetary surface. Sir, we may have been operating under flawed assumptions about human military doctrine. These attacks suggest extensive underground infrastructure that survived orbital bombardment, along with manufacturing capability sufficient to produce increasingly sophisticated weapons. For the first time since arriving at Kepler 442b, Corvan felt something that hegemony tactical manuals claimed was impossible when facing technologically inferior opponents. He was being outmaneuvered by an enemy that understood warfare better than his own forces. Tactical recommendation? He asked, though he suspected the answer would challenge everything he thought he knew about human military capability. Unknown, sir. These opponents don't fight like other species we've encountered. They seem to view our technological advantages as problems to be solved rather than insurmountable obstacles. Every countermeasure we implement is met by adaptation that exploits whatever new vulnerabilities our changes create. In the underground command center, Thorne was coordinating the final phase of his deception operation. The systematic convoy attacks had served their purpose, forcing the hegemony to reduce bombardment intensity while demonstrating human technical capability. Now it was time to convince Corvan that human resistance was collapsing, setting the stage for humanity's real counterattack. Begin broadcasting staged surrender messages, he ordered his communications team. I want the aliens to believe we're running out of supplies and losing coordination. Make it look like our attacks are becoming more desperate and less effective. Sir, Rodriguez asked, won't that encourage them to increase bombardment operations? Exactly what we want. When they resume intensive bombardment operations, they'll be vulnerable to the strike we've been preparing since this operation began. Above them, Korvan was about to receive intelligence that would convince him that victory was finally within reach, intelligence carefully crafted to exploit his assumptions about how defeated enemies behave. The ghosts in the machine were about to reveal their true nature. Dr. Sarah Chen had dedicated her career to theoretical physics, but nothing in her academic background had prepared her for the technical challenge that would determine humanity's survival. The salvaged hegemony shield generator hummed on her laboratory table, its crystalline matrix pulsing with energy patterns that defied conventional understanding of electromagnetic theory. The frequency rotation isn't random, she reported to Lieutenant Commander Thorne, her voice hoarse from 72 hours of continuous analysis. It follows a complex mathematical progression designed to prevent resonance attacks, but the transitions between frequencies create exploitable vulnerabilities. Thorne studied the equations covering every available surface in the converted mining facility that served as their primary research laboratory. Around them, dozens of human engineers worked frantically to transform industrial equipment into weapons capable of reaching orbital targets. Exploitable how? He asked, though he suspected the answer would require risking everything on a single desperate gamble. Every 4.7 minutes, the shield matrix recalibrates its frequency harmonics to prevent enemy forces from matching its defensive patterns. During recalibration, there's a 0.003-second window where the protective field destabilizes completely, if we could time an attack to coincide with that exact moment. What would we need for precise timing? Dr. Chen gestured toward the converted manufacturing floor where human engineers had created the most sophisticated weapons production facility in colonial history. Quantum timing devices synchronized to the shield frequency, explosive charges capable of penetrating destabilized barriers, and delivery systems that can reach orbital altitude while maintaining timing precision. The technical requirements seemed impossible, but Chief Engineer Martinez had been achieving the impossible for weeks. Mining equipment designed to fracture asteroids had been converted into missile guidance systems. Industrial fabricators that had once produced colony infrastructure now manufactured precision timing devices. Most remarkably, obsolete atmospheric fighters hidden in underground hangars since before the invasion were being retrofit, for orbital strike missions. 12 aircraft maximum, Martinez reported, reviewing the technical specifications that would determine their attack capability. Each fighter stripped of non-essential systems to maximize payload capacity, quantum timing devices, synchronized explosive charges, and enough fuel for a one-way mission to orbital altitude. Thorne absorbed the implications without flinching. 12 pilots, 12 chances to exploit a vulnerability window measured in milliseconds. Success meant survival for everyone in the underground facilities. Failure meant extinction. How accurate is the timing synchronization? He asked. Perfect, if our analysis is correct, Dr. Chen replied. The quantum timing devices will trigger detonation during the next shield vulnerability window with precision measured in nanoseconds. But, Commander. Her expression grew grim. If we're wrong about the frequency patterns, or if the aliens have different shield technology than we've analyzed, the charges will detonate harmlessly against full defensive barriers. The stakes couldn't be higher, but Thorne had been coordinating the most complex deception operation in human military history specifically to create this opportunity. Intelligence reports indicated that Captain Korvan was finally beginning to believe that human resistance was collapsing exactly as the carefully orchestrated misinformation campaign intended. Communications report? He asked Specialist Rodriguez, who had been managing the quantum burst network that disguised military coordination as civilian distress calls. Staged surrender broadcasts from Sectors 4 through 7 transmitted on schedule. Alien intercepts should indicate ammunition shortages, medical emergencies, and desertion among remaining human forces. We've also been broadcasting requests for evacuation assistance and surrender negotiations. The deception required sacrificing real positions to make the false information credible. Human teams had evacuated from prepared defensive positions, leaving behind evidence of hasty retreats and abandoned equipment. Carefully crafted radio transmissions spoke of collapsing morale and desperate attempts to reach alien forces for surrender negotiations. Surface reconnaissance confirms reduced alien patrol intensity, reported Lieutenant Torres. They've decreased bombardment frequency by 40% and begun preparing landing zones for ground occupation forces. Perfect. While Corvan celebrated what appeared to be the final collapse of human military resistance, 12 volunteer pilots were preparing for missions that would redefine interstellar warfare doctrine. Captain Marcus Webb checked his flight systems one final time while reviewing approach vectors that would take him through the most dangerous aerospace environment in human history. The atmospheric fighters had been hidden in sealed underground hangars during the initial invasion, dismissed by alien intelligence as obsolete aircraft irrelevant to modern warfare. Final briefing, Thorne addressed the 12 pilots who understood they were volunteering for certain death in exchange for uncertain victory. You're not engaging in aerial combat. This is a precision delivery mission requiring perfect timing and absolute commitment. Get the quantum charges to target and detonate them during the shield vulnerability window. Webb nodded along with his fellow pilots, each understanding that success meant death, but failure meant extinction for every human in the underground facilities. The fighters had been stripped of defensive systems, life support redundancy, and return fuel capacity to maximize payload space for quantum timing devices and synchronized explosive charges. Approach vector utilizes orbital debris, was created by alien bombardment operations, Webb noted, studying tactical displays that showed their planned route. Metallic wreckage will interfere with enemy sensors until we're within visual range of target vessels. By then it won't matter, Thorne replied. You'll either have completed the mission or died attempting it. Either outcome demonstrates something about human warfare doctrine that the hegemony needs to understand. Above them, Captain Corvan was making the strategic error that human planners had anticipated, reducing his fleet's alert status based on intelligence reports indicating human collapse. Surface resistance appears to be entering final disintegration phase, Corvan informed his senior staff, reviewing carefully fabricated intelligence that painted exactly the picture Thorne wanted him to see. Intercepted communications indicate critical shortages of ammunition, medical supplies, and coordination capability among surviving human forces. His tactical officer studied the same manufactured evidence with professional satisfaction. Recommend transitioning to ground occupation protocols within 48 hours. Industrial assessment teams can begin preliminary operations under minimal security arrangements. Agreed. Reduce fleet alert status to Condition 3. Begin systematic bombardment of remaining human positions to encourage final surrender. The orbital bombardment that had terrorized human civilians for weeks was about to provide cover for humanity's most desperate counterattack. Every plasma strike that lit up Kepler 442b's atmosphere would mask the thermal signatures of 12 atmospheric fighters carrying synchronized charges designed to exploit a vulnerability that existed for 0.003 seconds every 4.7 minutes. In the underground command center, Thorne received final confirmation that all systems were operational and timing synchronization was perfect. Quantum devices locked onto target shield frequencies, Dr. Chen reported. Detonation sequence will initiate during the next vulnerability window in approximately 4 hours. Execute the mission, Thorne ordered, understanding that he was either witnessing humanity's greatest military innovation or its final defeat. All departments prepare for immediate tactical reassessment based on mission results. The science of war was about to collide with the reality of human determination in a confrontation that would determine whether technological superiority could overcome tactical innovation backed by absolute commitment to victory. Captain Marcus Webb felt his atmospheric fighter shudder through the superheated air column left by Corvan's latest plasma bombardment. the turbulence masking his aircraft's signature as it climbed toward the edge of space. Around him, 11 other modified fighters maintained tight formation through the thermal chaos, their hulls scarred by radiation from previous bombardments, but their quantum timing devices synchronized to exploit a vulnerability that existed for 0.003 of a second. Ghost flight. This is Ghost Leader, Webb transmitted on the encrypted tactical frequency, his voice steady despite knowing these were almost certainly his final words. Maintain debris corridor approach. Remember, we get one chance at this. Make it count. 11 acknowledgments crackled through his headset as the strike formation climbed through the wreckage of humanity's original defense network. Twisted metal from destroyed orbital platforms, frozen atmosphere from breached installations, and the scattered debris of 3 weeks of systematic bombardment now provided concealment for humanity's counterattack. 3 kilometers below, Lieutenant Commander Thorne watched sensor displays tracking the fighters' progress through the debris field that had become their salvation. The wreckage that symbolized hegemony victory was now camouflaging the most precisely timed military operation in human history. Ghost Flight APR. Approaching optimal attack position, reported the underground flight controller, her voice tight with the tension of coordinating an operation where millisecond timing meant the difference between survival and extinction. Shield vulnerability window in 6 minutes, 15 seconds. The quantum timing devices in each fighter showed synchronized countdowns calibrated to Dr. Chen's analysis of hegemony defensive systems. Every calculation, every measurement, every theoretical model had led to this moment when human engineering would face the ultimate test against alien technology. Above the debris field, Captain Corvan was conducting routine bombardment operations with the confidence of a commander who believed victory was inevitable. Target Grid 77 Alpha prepared for systematic reduction, reported his weapons officer. Initiating primary cannon charging sequence. Corvan nodded absently, his attention focused on preparing occupation logistics rather than monitoring tactical displays. The apparent collapse of human resistance had convinced him that the campaign was effectively over, a fatal assumption that human deception operations had carefully cultivated. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, a note of uncertainty in his voice. Detecting multiple contacts within the orbital debris field. Thermal patterns suggest metallic objects with unusual energy signatures. Probably resonance echoes from today's bombardment operations, Corvan replied without looking up from his logistics reports. Debris fields often generate false sensor readings. Continue charging sequence. The Hegemony flagship's massive plasma cannons drew power from the ship's primary grid, their charging cycle automatically triggering shield frequency rotation protocols designed to prevent weapon feedback from disrupting defensive systems. It was standard procedure, documented in technical manuals and practiced in thousands of training exercises. Dr. Chen had spent weeks analyzing those same technical procedures. Webb's tactical display showed 4 minutes until shield vulnerability window as his formation broke from the debris field, accelerating toward the massive Hegemony flagship, whose shields shimmered with the rotating frequency patterns that human physicists had mapped with desperate precision. "Ghost flight, weapons hot," Webb transmitted as his fighter's targeting system locked onto the alien vessel. "Arm quantum charges and maintain attack formation." For 90 seconds, the 12 fighters remained invisible to hegemony sensors, appearing as nothing more than another cluster of metallic debris in a space filled with the wreckage of their planet's defenses. Then, proximity alarms throughout the alien fleet began screaming warnings that would arrive too late to matter. "Multiple incoming missiles," Corvan's tactical officer shouted as his displays suddenly showed 12 small craft accelerating directly toward the flagship. "Bearing 07 Mark IV, estimated impact in 2 minutes. "Impossible," Corvan snapped, his attention finally focused on tactical displays that showed an attack that shouldn't exist. "Our bombardment eliminated all human atmospheric fighters. Evasive maneuvers, all defensive batteries, engage incoming targets." The flagship's point defense systems opened fire with streams of coherent energy designed to intercept missiles and small spacecraft, but the human pilots had trained for this moment. 3 fighters died in the opening salvo. Their pilots vaporized instantly as alien weapons found their mark, but the surviving aircraft maintained their attack vector with mechanical precision. Ghost leader to remaining flights, Webb transmitted as defensive fire turned the space around his formation into a maze of deadly energy beams. Maintain course. Do not deviate from timing sequence. 60 seconds to vulnerability window. 8 fighters remit. Ned, then 6 as more defensive fire tore through their formation. Webb felt his own aircraft shudder as a near miss superheated his hull plating, but the quantum timing device showed 30 seconds until the moment when hegemony shields would destabilize for 0.003 of a second. On the flagship's bridge, Corvan watched the tactical display with growing horror as surviving human fighters continued their approach despite withering defensive fire. "Why aren't they taking evasive action?" he demanded, unable to comprehend pilots who would fly directly into concentrated defensive fire. "They're maintaining course directly into our killing field." "Unknown tactical doctrine, sir," his tactical officer replied, his voice strained with the effort of coordinating defensive fire against targets that refused to behave according to standard intercept protocols. "Estimated impact in 20 seconds. 15 seconds until vulnerability window." Webb's fighter led the surviving aircraft through defensive fire that should have destroyed them completely, but human engineering had calculated approach vectors that exploited gaps in hegemony point defense coverage. The quantum timing device flashed amber, then green as shield frequency rotation reached the critical transition point that Dr. Chen had identified. "All ghost flights, execute, execute, execute." 6 fighters reached the hegemony flagship's hull during the precise 0.003-second window when shield generators were recalibrating their frequency matrices. The quantum charges detonated in perfect synchronization, their explosive force channeled directly through destabilized energy barriers into the ship's primary power distribution network. The cascade failure began immediately. Power distribution nodes throughout the massive vessel overloaded as quantum energy feedback surged through systems designed to handle control. Plasma flow but never exposed to direct fusion explosions. Emergency containment protocols activated automatically, triggering systematic shutdown of non-essential systems as the ship's computer network detected catastrophic power grid instability. Corvan felt artificial gravity fluctuate wildly as main power died, throwing his bridge crew against their control stations. Emergency lighting cast hellish shadows across tactical displays that flickered and died as backup power systems struggled to maintain basic ship functions. "Damage report," he commanded, gripping his command chair as the flagship's hull groaned under structural stress from power system failures cascading throughout the vessel's infrastructure. "Primary power grid completely offline," his engineering officer shouted over alarms that filled the bridge with cacophonous warnings. "Weapon systems non-functional. Life support operating on emergency reserves. Sir, we're completely dead in space." Through the flagship's viewports, Corvan could see his remaining vessels beginning to scatter as individual captains realized their command ship was crippled and fleet coordination had completely collapsed. Without centralized tactical control, his captains were falling back on independent survival protocols rather than coordinated military action. Then Lieutenant Commander Thorne's voice cut through the static on emergency communication frequencies. "Hegemony Forces, this is Lieutenant Commander Daxus Thorne, commanding officer of Kepler 442b Colonial Defense Forces. Your flagship is disabled and your fleet coordination is severed. We have additional strike capabilities positioned throughout this system, ready to engage your remaining vessels using the tactics that just eliminated your command capability." Corvan listened in stunned silence as the human commander continued with the professional courtesy of one military officer addressing another. "We offer terms for ye, our immediate withdrawal from human space. Complete evacuation of all hegemony forces from this system in exchange for safe passage to your jump point coordinates. You have 30 minutes to respond before we launch additional strikes against your remaining vessels." The tactical mathematics were brutally simple. Without his command ship, Korvan's fleet lacked the coordination capability to complete planetary bombardment while simultaneously defending against human attacks that had demonstrated the ability to penetrate hegemony defenses using precision timing that should have been impossible for their technology level. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, his voice carrying the shock of someone watching the impossible unfold. "If they can repeat these attacks against our remaining vessels." Korvan stared at tactical displays showing his scattered fleet, understanding that he faced a choice between strategic withdrawal and total annihilation. The humans had demonstrated something unprecedented: the ability to turn superior alien technology into a fatal vulnerability through tactical innovation and absolute commitment to victory. For the first time in hegemony military history, orbital supremacy had not guaranteed conquest. The tactical mathematics of defeat were irrefutable, written in the language of crippled starships and scattered formations that told the story of humanity's impossible victory. Captain Korvan stared at the damage assessments his surviving staff had compiled, each report reinforcing the same inescapable conclusion. Continued engagement would result in total fleet annihilation without achieving any strategic objectives. "Final casualty analysis, sir," reported his tactical officer, his voice hollow with the weight of unprecedented military failure. "Flagship propulsion offline, weapons systems destroyed, estimated repair time 14 months in full orbital facility. Fleet coordination capability eliminated. Remaining vessels lack sufficient firepower to complete planetary pacification while maintaining defensive posture against demonstrated human strike capabilities." Korvan absorbed the numbers that spelled the end of everything hegemony military doctrine had promised about technological superiority. His battle group had achieved orbital supremacy exactly as predicted, eliminated surface military installations with textbook precision, and maintained space superiority for 3 weeks. None of it had mattered. "Assessment of human strike capability?" he asked, though he already understood the answer would determine whether his remaining crews lived or died. "Unknown total strength, sir. Demonstrated precision timing capability indicates technical sophistication our intelligence assessments completely failed to detect. If they possess additional synchronized charges and delivery systems capable of exploiting shield vulnerabilities." The tactical officer left the sentence unfinished, but the implications were clear to everyone on the bridge. Through his damaged flagship's viewports, Korvan could see the scattered formation of his remaining 10 cruisers, each captain maintaining position while awaiting orders that would either save their crews or condemn them to destruction. Below them, Kepler 442b continued its rotation, its surface scarred by weeks of systematic bombardment, but its underground defenders still capable of repeating the attack that had reduced his command vessel to drifting wreckage. "Open communication channel to human forces," Korvan commanded, his decision crystallizing around tactical reality rather than military pride or political considerations. "This is Captain Korvan to Lieutenant Commander Thorne. We accept your terms for complete withdrawal from this system." The response arrived within minutes, Thorne's voice carrying the professional courtesy of one military officer addressing another across the vast gulf of species and ideology. "Acknowledged, Captain Korvan. All hegemony vessels will proceed directly to jump point coordinates under escort monitoring. Any deviation from prescribed exit vector will be interpreted as hostile action and engaged accordingly." The 3-day journey to the system's edge became a masterclass in tactical restraint and strategic communication. Human reconnaissance aircraft, the same obsolete atmospheric fighters Korvan had dismissed during initial intelligence assessment, shadowed his formation at extreme sensor range, demonstrating both capability and discipline that challenged every assumption about human military organization. "Sir," his communications officer reported during the second day of withdrawal, receiving tactical intelligence updates from other operational sectors. Similar coordinated human resistance operations reported at Proxima Centauri, Wolf 359, Tau Ceti, and 7 additional systems. attacks utilizing precision timing against shield frequency vulnerabilities across multiple theaters of operation. The scope of human strategic coordination became clearer with each intelligence report. This hadn't been desperate improvisation by isolated colonial survivors. It had been systematic military doctrine development and implementation across multiple star systems during active combat operations. While hegemony forces celebrated apparent victories over primitive human defenses, their enemies had been sharing technical innovations and developing countermeasures through communication networks disguised as civilian distress broadcasts. Impossible, Corvan muttered, studying reports describing remarkably similar attacks across dozens of light-years of space. How did they coordinate tactical development during active invasions of their worlds? His intelligence officer provided the analysis that would fundamentally alter hegemony understanding of human warfare capabilities. Quantum burst communication networks integrated into civilian emergency broadcast systems, sir. What we interpreted as random distress calls and evacuation requests were actually encrypted tactical data sharing between resistance movements across multiple star systems. Corvan spent the final day of withdrawal compiling his after-action report, documenting the military failure that would end his career while possibly preventing similar disasters throughout hegemony space. The humans had demonstrated something that challenged the foundation of imperial expansion doctrine: the ability to convert technological inferiority into tactical advantage through strategic innovation and coordinated resistance operations. Personal log, final entry regarding Kepler 442b tactical assessment, he recorded as his crippled flagship limped toward the jump point. Human military forces demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally challenge core assumptions of hegemony conquest doctrine. They converted apparent defeat into operational camouflage, utilized our technological advantages against our own forces, and maintained strategic coordination across interstellar distances during active combat engagement. He paused, watching stars wheel past damaged viewports as his fleet prepared for hyperspace transit that would carry news of defeat back to hegemony space. Critical tactical assessment. These opponents do not engage in warfare according to established patterns. They treat military defeat as merely another tactical position from which to launch coordinated counterattacks. Their primary strategic asset is not technological capability, it is their absolute refusal to acknowledge the concept of insurmountable odds. 8 months later, Corvan stood before a hegemony military tribunal, neural restraints humming against his skull as recording devices prepared to extract every detail of his testimony for strategic archives and military education programs. The chamber was filled with senior officers who had come to understand what his defeat meant for imperial expansion into human territory. The prosecution alleges gross military incompetence resulting in the loss of a capital ship and strategic failure of a priority conquest operation, announced Magistrate Veltara, her voice carrying the weight of imperial authority. How do you respond to these charges, former Captain Corvan? Corvan met her gaze without flinching. I accept full responsibility for tactical failure, Magistrate. However, I categorically reject allegations of military incompetence. My forces executed established conquest doctrine with textbook precision. We achieved orbital supremacy, eliminated surface military installations, maintained space superiority, and began systematic pacification operations exactly as specified in imperial military procedures. Yet you were defeated by technologically inferior opponents using obsolete equipment. Correct, because our doctrine operates on the flawed assumption that orbital supremacy equals guaranteed conquest. The humans taught us that this assumption can be exploited by opponents who understand warfare as applied problem-solving rather than demonstrations of technological superiority. The tribunal's deliberations lasted 5 days, but political necessity predetermined the verdict. Corvan was stripped of rank and reassigned to strategic research positions, officially disgraced but quietly tasked with developing new tactical frameworks for human engagement operations. The practical consequence of Kepler 442b, however, was the complete cessation of hegemony expansion into human space. 4 additional defeats at other colonies, each following tactical patterns developed during Corvan's failed campaign, convinced imperial leadership that humans represented an unprecedented threat requiring fundamental revision of conquest doctrine. Final testimony regarding human military capabilities for strategic archives. Corvan spoke into the recording interface, his words destined for military academies throughout hegemony space. Human forces possess a strategic mindset that treats every tactical setback as preparation for coordinated counterattack operations. They convert military defeats into operational advantages, utilize enemy technology against its creators, and maintain resistance coordination across interstellar distances during active combat situations. He leaned toward the recording sensors, ensuring his words would be preserved for future commanders who might face similar challenges. Their most dangerous characteristic is their approach to tactical problem-solving. While our forces celebrated orbital victories and prepared for occupation operations, they were systematically analyzing our weaknesses and developing precision solutions to overcome our technological advantages. They transformed our greatest strength, orbital space superiority, into the tactical position that allowed them to study our vulnerabilities and exploit them with devastating effectiveness. The recording chamber fell silent as Corvan delivered his final strategic assessment. We were not defeated because we were outfought in conventional terms. We lost because we failed to understand that we were engaging a species that approaches warfare as systematic problem-solving backed by absolute commitment to resistance. They did not need to match our technological capabilities. They only needed to identify the precise moments when our advantages became exploitable vulnerabilities. The neural interface powered down, leaving Corvan alone with the knowledge that his tactical failure had probably saved the hegemony from a significantly larger catastrophe. The humans of Kepler 442b had demonstrated restraint during his withdrawal, but intelligence reports indicated their tactical innovations were spreading rapidly to other human worlds. Somewhere in human space, other commanders like Lieutenant Commander Thorne were studying captured hegemony technology and developing new methods to convert alien advantages into fatal weaknesses. The war was over, but the lesson in the relationship between technological superiority and tactical innovation was just beginning to reshape military doctrine throughout the galaxy. The perfect victory had become humanity's greatest triumph, and the hegemony's most valuable education in the true nature of warfare.